Okay, and you'll have to unmute yourself, Alan.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and really glad to see you here. Even though I live in the mountains of Montana, this tonight's subject is something that could become very near and dear to my heart if the right circumstances occur. Tonight we have a gentleman by the name of Alan Kuhre. Is that it, Alan?
That's close, Rick. Cure, but yeah.
Okay, I'm
Like
terrible on names.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. And he currently lives in Southwest Florida, where he almost exclusively fly fishes the backwaters in Collier and Lee counties. He joined the Fly Fishing Club, the Backwater Fly Fishers, in 2003. That's after serving 20 years as an Army dental officer from 1981 to 2001. And I'm also a retired Army officer.
Ooh, yeah.
So we're kindred spirits. My passion, or excuse me, Alan's passion is for kayak fly fishing, also tying and tweaking saltwater fly patterns. It keeps him busy most of the days of the week. He enjoys talking with similar individuals on all aspects of the sport. He looks forward today to sharing 3 very effective fly patterns and several fly tying tips. He also hopes that if you get a chance to fish the salt in Southwest Florida, that you will not miss the opportunity. As immense as this area is, it's undergoing considerable challenges from development, agricultural, and industry, as we were just talking about. So Alan says, thanks for your interest in today's presentation. And with that, Alan, do you know how to spotlight yourself?
Let's see. How do I spotlight myself? No, I don't, Rick.
I'll do it for you.
Thank you. There we are.
There you go.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for attending tonight. I want to give a brief overview on the area of the world that I fish. It's Southwest Florida, particularly, Naples, Fort Myers, sometimes down in the Keys. And obviously it's a saltwater environment. Sometimes it's salinity's high. Sometimes there's barely a hint of salt in the water. So we're talking about estuaries. And this area, it's an incredible fishery. We do get people traveling from around the world to book with a lot of the better guides, targeting tarpon, the Keys, all the way up to Tampa. Homosassa used to have world record tarpon, in the 200-pound class. We've got a lot of juvenile fish, which, from the 50 to 85-pound, as well as much smaller ones, which are more to my liking, fishing from a kayak. Another popular species are snook. They a little sensitive to water temperature. If that water temp gets below 60, they don't do very well. They almost go kind of comatose. So there is a season where people can harvest those snook. Tarpon are catch and release, but that season's for closure is based basically on water temps. The snook do spend a lot of time in the backcountry, and then during the summer months from July to September, generally they go out to the ocean near the beaches and spawn. And the third popular fish that we target a lot are redfish, known as spot-tailed bass up in the Carolinas, or red drum, but we'll just call them redfish for tonight. I want to talk just a little bit about the saltwater. Obviously, some of these fish are quite large. The patterns you're casting are quite large. So you're going to need a heavier rod than what I would use if I were fishing for trout or even, small bass. Generally, for the tarpon, you're looking a tarpon of any size, 8, 9, 10 weights on up. The snook, Similarly, there are some 25-pound snook in the area, which reason when be towards the shore and the structure to try to cut you off. So you need to have a fairly stout rod, a good drag, and keep them out of the mangroves or out of the structure. And then the redfish they're pretty much everywhere. You'll see them at very low tides, crawling almost on what we call crawlers along the mangrove shoreline at low tide, where you'll see the dorsal fin, the tail fin out of water. And it's a great sight fishing opportunity as they're looking for generally crabs and shrimp, and they will attack a bait fish as well. So the other thing about the species, you need stout outfits, stout leaders. Generally fluorocarbons, what most folks use. It gives you a little more abrasion resistance, as well as visual. It's not as apparent to the fish. It kind of hides itself. That fluorocarbon is really good. And you got to be sure to rinse off your gear. I know a lot of the rods. I had a freshwater rod, Fenwick, that I tried using and ruined that pretty quick with the corrosion. Just being exposed to salt water, not immersing it in, which I see people do, makes no sense to me. But you want to make sure you rinse and dry off your equipment after your day on the water. So the first pattern that I want to show you is it's called a light bulb, and I'm going to try to turn on this iMac and show you a couple of photos of that. Just bear with me a second, and see if I can screen share. And this fly is about 2.5 inches in length. Let's see. I screen share. There we go. And this fly will take care of pretty much any fish out in the water that eats bait fish. So redfish, snook, tarpon, jacks, sea trout. They love this thing. It's a very, Tom Shadley at our local fly shop, Mangrove Outfitters, came out with this pattern about 30 years ago. I've tweaked it a bit to include this bucktail. I think it gives it a little more resistance to fouling than using all synthetics. Got a palmered skirt here and Estes Grande. And I do spend a little bit of time making the eyes. I do like using 100-pound mono. I think I create a more lifelike eye than some of the black mono that you can purchase. Let me show you the next slide. And, to me, that looks more realistic than just a matte black. And I used the 100-pound mono, put it at the base of a flame, candle flame, and let it kind of catch fire, and it'll form a ball. Pull it away, and it usually goes out by itself, or you can give it, just kind of wave it, and then the flame goes out. And then I'll cut it off and then do the other end. So I wind up with about, maybe a 1/2 inch spread between the two melted round balls. And then I use a black Sharpie to create that pupil and cover it with Loon UV thick resin. And these things are super durable. I've used a lot of other alternatives. Like I mentioned, the inexpensive mono, black mono or orange or whatever color you want to use. These fish have a tendency to rip these things in half, and they just don't last. Or if you snag it in the mangroves and you go to, pull it out, a lot of times you'll destroy the eyes if they're just regular plastic. But 100-pound mono is pretty darn durable, and I think you get a real good result with that. So I'm going to go stop the screen share, and I want to show you a materials list for that fly. So those of you who want to tie this later, if you want to take a photo of that, this will go from the hook all the way down through the body and the head. And this is I hope that's in focus enough where you can read it. If you have any questions, just let me know.
It's
Okay,
in focus just fine.
say again, sir?
It was in focus just fine.
Oh, it was. Thank you. Good. And then we'll do that similarly for the other two flies. So let me turn off this iPad. We're going to focus over to this camera that will give you a sitting across from me type of view. We'll see how that works. And the light bulb, I use a variety of hooks. The SC 15 and a 1/0 by Gamakatsu. You can see wide gap. In the vise is a B10S Stinger, which I'm going to switch out for another hook, which I really like. And that's a Gamakatsu SL12S and a 1/0. The number 2 is good, but if you're going to target bigger fish, you have to go from the number 2 to the 1/0. For some reason, there isn't one in between, which I would think would be a number 1. So doesn't seem to be available. So we'll take one of those out and get started. As I mentioned, the tail is bucktail. And let's take this puppy out. There we go. And we'll get some bucktail in there. And this hook, fairly stout, fairly thick compared to the the B10S. They have a similar gap, but it blends in nicely. So let's get some white thread on there. And with a lot of saltwater patterns, I think it's a huge advantage to always have that thread on tension. Being monofilament, it does stretch just like your fly lines and your leader material. And when you let off the tension, it has a tendency to rebound like a rubber band and really grab onto the materials that you have applied to the hook. So I'm going to go back to the front. And this hook has a fairly wide shank, so I don't need to build up a base for the mono eyes. But I want to get the eyes in place because that gives me a reference for the length of bucktail to put on there. So yeah, about a full eye length behind. And this is the eye we're going to put on. I've got some pliers, and this is 100-pound mono. I'm going to give it a good squeeze to create a flat area. It helps keep these things from rotating. You might be able to see that squish mark or flatten. So we'll put that right in a figure 8 that with some tension. And then I like to push these up a little bit so the actual eye is above the shank of the hook. A little more realistic. And if you're inclined, you can put a little, Loctite or something on there, but I kind of don't find it necessary at this point. Let's see. Now to create that pupil, see if I can do this so you can see black Sharpie. Try to get that a little more rounded, but we'll do the other. Been a busy day. It's not good to drink a lot of coffee when you're tying, but it is what it is. So then I use a bodkin and dip that in. There's my lamp. This is the Loon UV Thick. I think it works really well. And generally, that stuff doesn't pop off, even though the fish try their best to knock it off. This stuff adheres real nice to the monofilament. Got a little bit of a hair in there. And I think it helps to give you a little bit more of a transparent, realistic look with this UV resin on there. So we'll cure that here in a moment. Okay, there we go. So the eyeballs, what I like to do then is, you know, the tail, some folks will just tie in back here and then you've got a step. So I like to have the bucktail since it's definitely long enough. This fly is only going to be about 2.5 inches in length. So I'll get some medium bucktail, natural colors of white, and try to take the hair near the tip of the tail. It's going to flare a lot less. It's like a lot of other, I guess, elk, moose, whatever. Not that I have personal experience with that, but you don't want the hair to flare here. You just want to get it in. I like a nice little bit, and we'll put it in a hair stacker.
Hey, Alan, before you go on
Yes.
there, I got a couple of questions.
Yes.
Says what diameter or size thread are you working with?
Good question. This thread will take 4 to 5 pounds of force. It's Danville's. I'm going to get flat wax nylon and 210 denier. I think you can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
I pretty
Okay.
much exclusively use that. The only thing sometimes I'll tie a pattern where I don't want a colored thread. You can use mono, like in some of the EP fiber minnows. But yeah, that 210 gives you got to really hog on it, and it breaks when you, of course, hit the tip of the point of the hook. Other than that, it takes whatever you want to give it. Any others, Rick?
Okay, and the other one is, have you ever seen the Loon Cure? Have you ever seen the Loon Cure sticky?
I have not. No.
Okay.
Loon.
It has a reputation, I think, of that, but I've not seen it either.
What does it do? Any idea? Or Loon Cure sticky? I don't know.
Yeah, I have heard of it, and I think the problem is the light, the curing light that they use is not powerful enough to cure it really well.
Yeah, this larger. Yeah, it sounds like John, but this larger light, I actually thought the smaller one worked better, except it ran on regular alkaline batteries. And I left it in there, didn't use it for a few months, and it just ruined the light. I couldn't get it. So I like this one just because it's rechargeable with I guess, a small little lithium battery in there. But I don't think the output, they may say otherwise, but it doesn't cure quite as well, in my opinion, as a smaller loon light. But,
If it
this
gets
was the
sticky,
last
you can always cover it with Sally Hansen's.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had that trouble. I called Loon and they just said, just go deal with it, And I was like, oh, well, this is kind of weird. I did finally buy a different UV cure lamp and it seems to cure harder, but now I'm using the resin John. I got a little bottle of resin from John Wright that seems to do a really nice job. It's thin, but really, really good.
mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
I'm just gonna take the bucktail in this put it in this way. We don't have much static here. I know that's a problem out west. But we do have a lot of humidity, which just makes it hot. So you want to turn a fan on, and that's no good while you're tying. So we all have our things to deal with, I guess. So I want a nice straight cut there. Have a pinch wrap right behind the eyes. And then just come forward. This way, when we wrap our body, it's going to be nice and uniform. I'm going to go back to about the bend of the hook, which of course is right around where the barb is. If it's, and I'm putting a fair amount of pressure. I want to keep it right there. There we go. So let me move just, there we go. It's a little splayed out more than I would prefer, but it'll work fine. And then I've got some pearl estaz. I'll put about maybe 10 strands. Let's see here. I tie it on top and try to get it just to go down the sides a little bit. One of the problems, if you go online to Mangrove Outfitters, and Tom's got a real nice video of him tying a lot of his favorite patterns, but he doesn't use any bucktail. He uses a lot of synthetics. And for me, I find when I do that, when I'm casting and trying to get an extra 10 feet or so, I have a tendency to, it's not as smooth and delicate, and you get a lot of fouling. So I think having the bucktail with a little bit of this crystal fresh works good. And then the other thing I do, see where it is, there we go. We got some medium Palmer chenille. I'm going to wrap that right in this area. We put about 8 to 10 wraps, and that helps confine this crystal flash, keeps it in the right area. This stuff has got a huge, didn't realize that was a new package. They just take, about 6 inches or so. I like to shorten the amount right near the end of the You're not going to advance this very far, but you want to get about 8 wraps pretty much right on top of each other. It's a very thin cord, but it creates a nice skirt at the bend of the hook. And if it's flared too much, you of course can wrap back a little bit, which I'm going to do to reduce the flaring on that just a little. Be careful with those scissors, they're not meant for that. Yeah, something like that. And we'll get rid of those. Some people will tie the light bulb so it sinks a little bit, and they'll put a bead chain I like it on top because the snook and tarpon, they're always looking up above at the surface for this, these white bait fish patterns or flies. Actually, they're looking for fish that are white most of the time. Okay, the next thing we're going to use is this Estes Grande in a pearl. And a little thicker cord here. Doesn't hurt to cut a few of these, clear about 1/8 of an inch. So you got the bare cord, really secure it down. Now what I found is that the tips somehow, it's either, I'm not sure what it is in the water or from the fish, but they tend to discolor. But if you take some of this, again, the UV thick, and just coat the tip of that Palmer chenille, it keeps that, it seals the ends of that cord, and I don't have that problem. This is just basically to keep it nice and white down the road, because it's a durable fly. But you don't want that brown stain to start wicking its way up along this Palmer chenille. So we'll go ahead and cure that again. All right. I'll make it real bushy. That's what you want. Do a few wraps, pull tight, couple more wraps, pull tight. Advance our thread right up to the eyes. It's a fairly bright fly. Again, it gets their attention. You have a lot of tannic water in Southwest Florida from the fresh water interacting with the mangroves and stuff, and the water looks tea colored, but this fly shows up really well. And just make a thread head here, and we'll coat it with the UV resin again. And I'm coating it really well to, to cover up where that Estes Grande, the tip, so it really doesn't get discolored down the road. All right, where my whip finish go? There she is. I'm gonna do that little step in there. We'll just tighten that up. There we are. Again, a little more UV resin to seal it, and that's it's gonna be our light bulb. I like the Grande Estes. It's bushy. You can always trim it back a little bit if you think it's too bushy. And if it's for some reason way over the eyes, I'll do that. But I don't take too much. They have a medium pearl, which just doesn't give it enough bulk, enough girth to the fly. So this will land fairly soft, and actually, if it's not water soaked, it's going to stay real close to the surface, if not on the surface. You give it some strips, those fish are going to hit it. If you're in an area with a lot of algae or whatever, or you're casting into the mangroves, you may want to put on a weed guard. I'm going to do that on another fly, but they'll, you know, be a huge, be glad you did when you're in those situations. Okay, from the top. Believe it or not, that's probably my most favorite fly, the one I use all the time and then switch to others. Can I answer any questions or?
Joel's got a question. What weight fly line are you fishing this with? And have you ever weighted these flies?
Weighted them? I have not weighted this fly. I know some folks, like I mentioned, the only really weight they'll do is put on, you know, some bead chain or very light lead eyes if they're going deep. But I throw this on a 6 and 7, 8 weight. I generally am in skinny water in a kayak. I'm not fishing other than maybe 4 feet deep in some of these ponds. And I find, you know, you can really, with some of these better rods, you can put a lot of pressure on these fish. Generally, a 25-pound bite tippet is minimum, and depending on the fish, go up to 40. But you can put a lot of pressure with a 6, 7 weight on these fish. But some of them are just too darn big, though, to hold back. Yes, sir.
Flip is asking, does it ride hook up or down?
The hook point down. It'll ride just as is, just like that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, I have a really stupid question to ask you.
Oh, you don't.
Being a trout fisherman, you know, barbless hooks and, you know, pinching down your barb is a really good conservative or conservationist attitude. Just
Mhm.
out of curiosity, have you ever tried a saltwater type fish with a barbless type hook?
A lot of folks do, and they have good luck with it. I have not, and once in a while I wish I had, because it gets in a vital area where they're bleeding a bit, you know, in the gills. But for the most part, the barb actually helps quite a bit when you have these fish jumping up and you gotta, you know, as they say, you take some of the tension off. I think it does hold the fly in, but yeah, the amount of injury that does, maybe 1 out of 20, you probably could have, it might make a difference, but for the most part, I have not pinched down the barbs
Okay.
personally. Yeah.
Okay. Bill asks or makes a comment that looks to him like this would make a good walleye or northern pike
Interesting.
pattern. And
Uh-huh.
I'm looking at that too. It's the same way.
Yeah.
Hey, Alan,
Yes.
John right here.
Yeah, John.
I changed my flash screen tonight because I knew you were doing saltwater patterns. On November 10th of 2015, I had the most exciting night of fishing I've had with a fly rod in my whole life.
Really? Tell me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was down on Little Electric Island with a friend of mine, Gene Svensson, who was program lead from Lincoln, and we were snook fishing. And my flash screen is a picture that Gene took of me with the biggest snook I caught that night, and it was that was exciting. That's the only word I can use. Most exciting fly fishing I've ever done in my life.
They're beasts. Those fish, you can be 30, 50 yards away and you can hear one eat sometimes. They just,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to get over there. You know, and yeah, the sound of snook feeding, you know, coming up from underneath on those, and the pool is pretty impressive. And they do come up out of the water a lot, like a, you know, not like quite like a tarpon, but they almost clear out of the water. The smaller ones will clear the water by a foot or two. Yeah, it's a great game fish. And,
It is. I just had, I still have dreams about it at night. So, and that was, that's almost 10 years ago. So,
wow. Okay, I want to, if there's no other questions on the light bulb, let's move on to another pattern that's more geared towards those tailing redfish that we find on the flats. I'm going
Yeah,
to show that to you and switch out my materials here.
Before you change that out, Alan,
Yes.
Ken asked if you could hold the ruler up one more time.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Let's see, I think that's 3, it's not showing, but it's about at least 2.5 inches, almost just shy of 3 inches. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, perfect.
all right.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
the tail is at least 1.5 times the length of the shank, correct? Roughly.
Yeah,
Or is
if you
it
go
just
from the
one?
back of the bend to the front of the hook eye, it's pretty comparable. Not quite 1.5, but I'm saying from the front to about right here. That's about halfway from here to here. But yeah, it's every bit. And this shorter part here, the palmer hackle there, or the palmer chenille, that goes back at least the width of the hook gap, create that skirt. But
Do you ever
yeah,
tie it on a small? Do you ever tie it on a smaller hook?
I do. I've tied it on a this is I believe a 1/0. I've tied it on a number 2. And I've tied it on some different hooks, a little smaller. This is about as big as I need for a 40-pound tarpon. It's a real stout big game hook, the SL12S. I'll show you that again. Extremely sharp, wide gap, and fairly stout metal they use to make this hook.
Alan, you fish for 40-pound tarpon in a kayak?
Yeah, I'll jump them. I don't. A lot of times they come off. The biggest one I landed, John, was probably an honest 70 to 85 pounder.
You're a better man than I, my friend, I'll tell you.
But I did that 15 years ago, and I was towed for 3 hours with an anchor. And, that's the last time I want to do that. It's tough on the fish, tough on me, but man, I was in heaven. I said, I can die tomorrow and I'm happy,
I'll tell you what, the next time I go down to Tampa to visit my brother, I'm throwing my kayak on the top of the truck, and you and I are going to have to get together.
There you go. Yeah, please let me know. We'll do it. Yeah, fish that big, do it once, but then I think Al's mentioned anything over, maybe 30 pounds is more than enough fish. But they are so fun, like the snook, great fish. All right, I'm going to show you, let me screen share. This is the next pattern, which again, I've caught tarpon, snook, red, sheep's head. It's a brown mangrove crab pattern that I use quite often when I'm targeting redfish, almost exclusively. Let's see if that comes up. There we go. And I'm going to get some different materials. I'll be right back. This was a pattern that Dr. Aaron Adams with Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, originally Bonefish Tarpon Unlimited. Aaron's got several books on saltwater prey and flies. A real interesting fellow and a very accomplished angler. And Aaron came to our club, the Backcountry Fly Fishers, a couple times and tied some flies that he uses in the Pine Island Sound area. And this is one of 3 flies that he uses all the time. A brown mangrove crab is a crab that generally is out of the water and on the mangrove roots. The red mangroves have just an incredible system of roots. They really an incredible plant that secures the shoreline during storms, hurricanes, things like that. And these crabs are all in the roots. Birds, fish, anytime these things fall in the water, they're all over them. So let me show you, let's see, I'll show you the, get this different screen here. This is the recipe. You want to take a photo of that. Using a lot of Puglisi fibers for the body, bead chain eyes. And with reds, gold is a great color. Have a little bit of crystal flash in the tail, as well as the gold and the bead chain eyes. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back and get this light bulb out of here and we'll get tying. And there's the hook. And this is the Kamigatsu B10S. This one's a number 2, a little larger than the 4, but I've used them both. And with the 2, I use these bead chain eyes, and this we'll use the large today. Just got some little wire snips to cut off. One here. Going to use some 210 denier. This is a rusty brown. Get that on my, I don't know where all my bobbin holders went to, but bear with me here. There we go. And one around the other side. Okay, again, we're going to put a thread base touching wraps from the hook eye to the bend and all the way back. This hook's a little less stout, so I'm trying to support it as I'm wrapping under pressure. And I get near the bend of the hook, it'll do just fine. Get to the bend and then just come forward. If I were tying this a little smaller tonight on the number 4 B10S, it's a real light hook. It's got a wide gap for its size. And I like the kind of black finish on it. It doesn't contrast with the colors of the fly. So it works out quite well. All right, let's cut.
Alan, have you ever tried tying them on first and cutting them next?
Say again, John?
Yeah, tie your bead chain on first and then cut them off. Sometimes it's a little easier.
No, I haven't. See, the way I tie it on, I can't imagine having that hanging kind of get in the way, I would think, but
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
when I'm doing these under wraps, yeah. Now, I should have had them cut out, of course, beforehand, but, you know, is what it is. This is on real good, you know, under tension, figure 8, and then those over the shank, under the eye, back and forth, really locks that in real nice. problem with salt water, unless you've got a freshwater cup with you after you've used the fly. If you have it on your kayak, just sitting out in the air for 6 to 8 hours, it's going to be rusty. You're going to lose that patina, that finish, unfortunately. But it just is. It's part of the game with this fly. Again, I'm using the bucktail. Kind of near the tip, I'm going to grab a little bit of the brown there. And not a long tail by any means, but just take a little pinch. I know some folks saturate everything with, glue or adhesives. And a lot of times that doesn't matter. If you got a fish and a lot of this stuff you may tie before or the day before, and if you can smell it, the fish can surely smell it. Well, most fish like snook and reds, snook and tarpon, are going to attack that fly real impulsively. They're not really too concerned about what it smells like. But reds, they've got so many foramen or openings around their lips and heads that I've had them come up to the fly and I'm like, okay. And then they just run like nothing. I'm like, what happened? And then I'm thinking I'm using adhesives, really kind of stinky stuff for like the head cement. So the UV resin seems to work really well when I want to create that patina or whatever, hold things. But some of these adhesives and glues, if you can smell them, I don't use them, especially on a redfish fly. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how I tie in the body with a lot of pressure, taking advantage of this thread so that you don't have any need for adhesive on the body. Okay, so we got the tail. We're going to add a little bit of this gold crystal flash. I guess, yeah, it's about hook shank length of bucktail there. And this is going to ride hook point up. Someone asked about the light bulb, but this one, you want it to ride hook point up. And to help that, I'm going to go back a little further, securing this bucktail to the bend of the hook, and it actually is an advantage. So it's a little bit down, so when it flips over. Now in this pattern, I've added all kinds of eyes and hackle and stuff like that, and nothing seems to matter as far as its fish attraction or catching, except for one thing, which we'll get to here in a little bit. So that's more than enough flash, about the length of the tail. Spread it out a little bit. Do a little pinch wrap. Just come forward. See what you got. Some of this extra you don't need. Kind of want it to splay out a little bit. You always get a wild one that just, it's part of the game. You got to get rid of him. All right, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So when I flip this over, that's what I have. You can see how that tail goes up maybe 10, 20 degrees from the hook. Okay, what I'm going to add here now, a little dubbing loop, and we're going to add a little bit of create an egg sac. Let's see, yeah, there she is. I just like to put a toothbrush here to keep that separated. Good. Yeah, you really can't see what I'm doing there. Apologize for that. Caroline makes a real nice color. It's this Ice WV shrimp pink. Let's take a little pinch of that and I misplaced my favorite wax, which came from Boise. But I'm just going to put a little dubbing wax here. But I find this egg sac seems to make a little bit of a difference to the reds. They kind of like, oh man, they don't hesitate. They grab it a little with more gusto. Sometimes these fish are so undecided, like they know better. So, all right. You can see what I'm doing now. Let's see if we can lower. I'm gonna lower the camera just a little bit. Bear with me. There we go. Should have done that earlier. Yeah, sometimes you get wasn't cautious. Got to watch that crystal flash. It wants to get involved in this. Well, there's a whole bunch of redfish fly patterns. A lot of them are crab-like or shrimp and crab combination. I just find this to be one of the simpler patterns that works as well as any that I've ever tried. And I'm kind of, every fly works best in certain scenarios. And like I say, this is for tailing redfish, real skinny water. So this fly will land soft, doesn't need to sink far, but it will sink slowly. And the colors are pretty darn good for what fly looks like. So I've got some EP fibers. This is the original. This particular one is brown. They make a dark brown. I think you might be able to see the difference. But I blend those two together and occasionally we'll add a little bit of black, create a mottled appearance for the crab. So I'm going to switch cameras, get this one. You can see a little better what I'm doing when I prep. Let's try this. Okay. Yeah, this is the dark brown. It's going to take a little bit. It's more than a little bit. I need a little less. There we go. That's right from the pack. I'll just set that there, and then I'm going to get some of the lighter brown right here. And then just a skosh of black. And just kind of work it together to create this. This is what I like to have, about 6 to 8 inches. Should be enough to tie the body of the fly. All right, let's see if we can get back in the game here. That's on snug. Was you point up. What I do is just take the thread, go over, bring the thread up in front
I'll use helicopter in it.
and down. You got it. Whoops, that would have been a mess. So I've got that like so. And now I hog down. I really push. I'm right. I'm going to put about 4 wraps going back a little bit. And I pulled a tad too hard. Let's see if we can.
Hi, dear. Honey, I'm home too. Thank you for dinner. You're very kind and thoughtful.
Was it okay?
It was delicious.
All right. Let's see if we can salvage that. I think we got it. Since I was not under tension, I'm gonna just, yeah, it's a little loose. So I go over. Figure right now I can hog down on it, come forward and then come back a little bit and I'm ready to tie in the next piece. I like to trim as I go, approximate the shape. Still in the. Go over that group. Position it a little bit. Got it where I need it, pull back, down. I saw, well, let me tell you a little bit about this fly. It's browns, dark browns, a little bit of black, but it's very common crab, probably the most common crab that you'll find in the backcountry here in Lee, Collier counties, Naples, Fort Myers area. I took this same pattern, same colors down into the Keys a few years ago with a friend of mine. We're off Big Torch Key and found quite a few redfish. So I said, oh, this is going to be great. I've got my fly all set, ready to go. I threw it in there. They totally ignored it. So I'd throw it closer, totally ignore it, and then they just would run from it. I'm like, what's going on? And then I pulled out a sand colored crab, similar pattern, a little bit different. Not quite a strong arm merkin, but they got all over it. They're used to a light colored crab, so it really does make a difference. I know where you all fish, anywhere, you gotta somewhat resemble what the fish are used to eating. And you gotta adjust. Just do 1 or 2 more here and we'll be in good shape. This is a pattern I have a lot of confidence in. Maybe that's part of it too. But it does seem to get the job done. I don't mind showing the eyeballs. Sometimes I'll add another to kind of cover them up if I feel I was too sparse on the body and it's gonna land too hard. So in this case, I think it's gonna be just fine. I come forward, do a thread head and whip finish. And I put on a weed guard tonight. I'll do a single stalk so you can see how that goes. Pretty simple. I know some guys have like 30, 40 pound. I just think that's too stiff. I use about a 20-pound weed guard. So what I'll do is take this out of the vise, set it on the table, hook point up, and really flatten it and then trim it. So let me just take her out for a moment. Put the squeeze on it, kind of finger on each side of those wraps. You get, something like this. So we'll put her back in and trim. Now, most crab patterns, like a tarpon toad, some of the others, they're fairly narrow at the front and they flare out. The cut is something like this. Mine's going to be pretty much straight and then I'll round to the back. It's just the way these guys are shaped. Pretty much a straight cut back. Try to duplicate the width on each side. And then at the eyes, I just come about mid-eyeball, cut straight across. Later, I'll round off that corner a little bit. Then about halfway back, you start creating a rounded contour going back to the egg sac. I've caught more reds on this particular fly by far than any others. That basically is a done pattern, except for the weed guard. And like I say, the hook point will stay up with the bucktail there, helps stabilize things. And let's reattach our thread and put down on a weed guard. After the weed guard on, then I'll put a little dab of, here we go. I'd be interested to hear from anyone what they use for tailing reds or redfish under mangroves in the real skinny water. If they use a crab pattern, or there are times when you got so much junk in the water, you got to go top water with like a gurgler. So, I see someone put in, how deep will you fish this pattern? I assume it's this one. Probably with these bead chain eyes and all, maybe 18 inches is as deep as I would go. And then as shallow as the fish is. And like I say, that can be 2 to 3 inches sometimes, probably closer to 3 to 5. But once in a while, it's unbelievable how shallow those fish would go. Now what I did, I flattened the end of that mono and rested it on the eye of the hook. And that way it keeps the thread from going off the mono and slipping under. So you create like a V-shape or a little paddle. I'm going to squeeze this in just to show you. I should have let's bring this up a bit so you can see it. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. See how
Yeah.
that's flat? It's kind of shoveled shape or whatever. If you put that flat end in the eye of the hook area, when you wrap, your thread's not going to slip off and go underneath as you're securing it. If you need to, I can show that again. I got a bend here. I just use I like to use my whip finish tool to, yeah, just to counter that bend. That kind of straightens that out. And then pliers. I just get it pretty darn close to where it's just about to touch. Here it's a little, just a skosh long. Yeah, it's just touching. And then when you flatten that out, it'll do a whip. No, we didn't finish. Okay, let's whip finish that. Got two things going on here.
While you're doing that, Jeff Hewitt said that in South Texas,
Yeah,
Laguna Madre,
yes.
use a similar crab, smaller, number 6 in white or tan.
Oh,
Dime-sized body, very sparsely tied, but similar to this.
uh-huh.
Small bead chain, single bead, or no eyes, for 6 to 12 inches of crystal clear water.
I bet that's on a lot of sand, maybe a little bit of, I don't know what the bottom is that he has there in Laguna. Is that Laguna Madre or?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if it's a light sandy bottom or a lot, is there turtle grass? I'd be curious to know that, but yeah. I'm sure they're rooting for
bottom
someone.
ranges from sand to clay to turtle grass.
Nice. Yeah, weed guard then probably pretty important to have.
Yeah,
So I think when I turn this, you can see a good angle how that weed guard is, and it's right in line with the hook. That's exactly how I would want it. And I've put UV thick on the actual eyes. It kind of helps, but you know, I'll just replace the eyes. I'll go back and save most of the body, secure the thread, and then take a razor blade, cut this off and put in one more body section and put in fresh eyes. I ordered some stainless steel gold bead chain. They're a tad heavier. And unfortunately, the ends, these are just a little rough, but the stainless steel, they're super sharp. I had to take a Dremel tool with a little sanding disc and smooth them off. And it seems they don't tarnish as much, but I think it's just not worth the effort. But if you have some water and maybe a little Saltex or something to remove the salt, put it in a little cup and just dip it in for 30 seconds and let it air dry. But you know, if you're using a different rod, I would do that first, and that way it shouldn't tarnish. But even if it does tarnish, it's going to catch fish.
I'm glad
There
you
you
made
go.
that. I'm glad you made that because I've looked at those things and looked at them, tried to figure out how in the world you do those silly bodies. A lot simpler than I thought.
Yeah, just a figure eight, Rick, like you're putting on eyes. I just do one wrap, but you could do a 2 or 3. And then I think key is to put a little stretch in that thread,
Yeah.
secure it, and then go forward and go back. So you're wrapping back over your thread, and it just seems to hold everything in place. But these aren't really going anywhere until a few fish have really chewed on it.
I'll
A great pattern. Great
have to
pattern.
tie one of those tonight.
There you go. All
Hey,
right. Yes.
Alan, I live over here in the panhandle of Florida, over towards Destin, Fort Walton Beach, and I fish with that pattern in a slightly different body color where I'm alternating white and tan or cream and tan.
Oh,
As a
yeah.
EP fiber. And on the tail section, instead of using the deer hair, the bucktail like you did, I'll use a craft fur, and I will get it to cant upwards by putting a rooster tail, palm or a rooster tail on that tail end. And that's the Quan that's
Yeah.
attributed to the South Florida Pat Dorsey, not the Colorado Pat Dorsey that many people know, especially in this group. But there's a Pat Dorsey down in the South Florida area who has this Quan pattern, KWAN. And if people are looking to see that, they can easily get on YouTube or even the FFI site and see that pattern. And yeah, I catch redfish. I catch just about anything during the summer months that's out there swimming here in the Choctawhatchee Bay area with this type of pattern.
Thanks for that comment. And yes, that Quan is a fairly popular pattern down here in the southwest part of Florida as well. It's good. I think it's probably as good as this pattern for the reds and the sheep's head. Yeah, it's always, you always got to find something new or mix it up a little bit, but that's appreciate the comment. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments on crabs or how to fish or anything? Okay. All right, let's go to the gurgler. And what I'm going to show you is a progression in this slide of 4 pretty much stages that I go through to tie a gurgler. And I think it's a fairly simple pattern. So let me screen share this and we'll talk about it a little bit. There we go. Finish fly with the green eyes on the right, and then the step 1 is basically bucktail with a crystal flash of your choice, and then the foam. You can buy rectangular pre-cut pieces of foam. Generally, it's 3 millimeter, but you can buy foam from 2, 3, and 4, probably even thicker than that. I don't know what I would do with anything over 4, but I'm going to comment a little bit about the second photo with the foam tied in, and you'll see those ridges or donuts. And I do that a specific reason to increase flotation rather than tie a whole bunch of wraps and compress that. And it also guides me in wrapping that root beer colored Estaz from back to front, and as well as where to secure the eyes. I think that might come in helpful there if you have a heavier hook or you happen to not have 3 millimeter foam and just have the Michaels or Joann's or Hobby Lobby 2 mil. If you create those donuts, so to speak, in the underbody, it might help you with the flotation. I've also added an extra layer of 2 millimeter, just doing that, and then on top of that, do another foam to increase flotation. But yeah, let me get the different materials and we'll go ahead and get started on that gurgler. The gurgler's a great topwater fly. And the way you design the, I'm going to switch back here. You design that foam strip, I think is kind of important. Let's get this guy out of here. Let's see, do we have one? This one's a little optionalized, but I just want to talk about it for a second. This is probably something I would use for a largemouth bass. It's got some things on there that, some folks love legs, so you can add legs. You got the tail. This is on a number 4 B10S, a great hook with a large gap, which you want. The tail's about, I would have a tail no longer than that. The reason is I'm targeting redfish a lot with this fly. And 8, 9 out of 10 reds will come from behind and they kind of push the fly out of the way if you have a long tail or you have stiff bucktails. So once in a while you get one to broadside it, and that's just fine. But they kind of come like a submarine right behind it, and it's so cool. You're stripping that, it's popping, and they're coming behind, and it's like a 30% ratio that they're going to actually grab the fly. So I like to use a short tail. You'll see these EPIs. I added a little bit of foam, but what they do is, since this is 2 milli, it's 3 millimeter foam. But over time of stripping this day in, day out, it puts a lot of pressure on that crease where that foam's tied in here. And this allows it to only go back so far and helps it spit the water or make the pops, the bubbles. So eyes are at least a piece of additional foam in there to help support this front flap or beak or whatever you want to call it, I think is important. So let's go ahead and tie that. And I want to describe a little bit more about how I shape the foam. There we go. We're going to tie this on a number 2 B10S. Excellent. Tarpon and snook absolutely love this, as well as sea trout. Was up at Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge a few years ago, and I could not believe the gusto that these 20 to 24-inch sea trout were just coming up slamming this topwater fly. It was a whole bunch of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the brown thread to start with. I've got some black purple bucktail. I'm going to get a little bit from the end. Black and purple is a great color combination here in the backcountry. A lot of guides say, I don't care what color it is unless it's black and purple, from baitfish pattern to anything. So we've got some bucktail here trimmed off, got some long ends. A short bushy tail is pretty nice. I think that's going to work fine. So let's trim that. And I don't, this I'm not concerned about tying it in all the way. Now, we got to get that thread on there. So let's do that. I find the thread base important to, I'm going to use a little Loctite glue when I secure the foam, and it seems to hold so much better if you have thread there rather than on the hook shank bare metal. So that's how I want it. Gurgler is a great fly early in the morning, later in the day, which I usually am not fishing late in the day, except in the summer months after a rainstorm. That rain will cool the water off, and on the spring tides, it's amazing. You get a real low tide in the late afternoons before sunset, and the reds just go crazy. They want to get up on the flats, especially when it's a full moon rather than a new moon or dark moon. So here say is a strip. All right, I'm going to hold it sideways here. And what you want to do is cut from one end, maybe 3/4 the way up at an angle, to create something like this, okay? You can use little scissors, but it doesn't work well. So what I use are these large scissors. I'll start at the bottom. Just try to cut straight as you can. And duplicate that same amount cutting from the bottom and try to end in the same general area. So you get a nice contour. Now the length of this is way too long, but just out of experience, I'm going to go about right there. So I've shortened it, and then again I'm going to tie it in just behind the hook, about where it bends. I want to create another some thinness. And the reason I do this is that if I had a thick, untrimmed piece of foam, it's going to cover up all the Estaz underbody. So this exposes more of the underbody. And all right, so we bring our thread forward. We've got well, let's put a little flash in there. Yeah, we'll go with, we'll go with this. Kind of a root beer color. I'm not sure it's the best choice, but we'll see. Similar to what we did on the crab pattern. Yeah, that'll work fine. All right. So there, like in that previous slide I showed you, that's the first stage. We're going to bring our thread forward up to I'm going to wrap, touching wraps right up to the eye of the hook. And I go back about an eye's length back. And that's going to be my tie-in point for. And you're going to form it and kind of bend it around the hook. I think you can see that. And this is going to create those donuts. But where I'm going to be tying in, I want to take some Loctite, which there she is. This is the Loctite gel. All right. So we know we're going to tie in here. We just put a dab. It's more than a dab right here where the bump is, and then right at the end. Okay, just hold that, light wraps, and then pull down. Then advance underneath, create another. I'm advancing back with a thread. I think you can see that. And then, yeah, go one more time back. That creates a nice little, well, caterpillar looking body. So the next thing we add, make this one with root beer Estaz. I'm going to tie this in the back. I just use those. Okay. And if I wanted to tie legs in, I can do that, and I'll just show you. Forget who on Al's program showed us how to do that really nicely. May have been Gary Begley up in Ohio. Dang, these are too short. Anyway, it's not going to be a Begley effect, but I'm going to go forward one more. Put one there. And we'll come around. Do the next one. Give it a little pull. Snug them up. They're good to go. Okay, then all we got to do is create our underbody with the S-DAS. Go up to the next one. Then we'll go in between our legs. Go up to the next donut. And tie it off. There we go. And now, all that's really left to do is to fold this over. And again, you know, I prefer not to have a lot of slack in the back. I like to make it pretty snug, just a personal preference. Then you're going to use that same groove that you've been tied off the S-DAS and everything else. I get it in there, then I'm really pushing down. And you can see the bill kind of will flare up like that. And at this point, we can add some eyes. And just to, I don't think I'm going to go with the EP eyes, but I'll go with some mono eyes that are going to show up real nice. Some orange here, and these will help, this, like I mentioned, will help just figure 8 that in here in front. And cross wraps. And this does give some protection to that bill, keeps it in position. And just lift it back, work your way in this slot here, then come forward and tie her off. There we go. I'll do one more for okay. Didn't trim any legs yet. Good. Now there's some discussion about how long to make the bill. You want to kind of help it. You know, you want a curved pattern to it, like you can see there. The shortest you can possibly want to cut it is right. Use the hook eye as a guide. I like to go forward a bit, maybe a couple mils in front. You get it where you want it, perpendicular, and a quick snap, and you get a nice bill like that. You don't want to cut foam slowly. Then you can take these guys. Shorten that one a little bit. And that's a gurgler. Like I mentioned, a lot of fun when you fish these guys. Any questions at all on that? And this is a 3 mil foam.
Bill made mention of the fact that he uses a small diameter rotary cutter with a clear straight blade edge to cut his foam. And I'll be honest with you. I do the same because I think it gives you a better cut and a better looking cut, and you can set it up however you want it pretty accurately.
Uh-huh.
This
Are
is
you using a ruler to guide you with that rotary cutter, or?
Yeah, I've got a cheap little protractor thing that I bought at Hobby Lobby, right?
Mhm.
And it's plastic, and I just run the rotary cutter up and down it. That's how I cut all my foams, other sheet material. Have used it for cutting furs and leathers, but really prefer a scalpel. I think I get better results with a scalpel, for making zonker strips and stuff. But yeah, I use a rotary cutter for many strip items. And since I shake enough, I wouldn't be able to hold the scissors straight enough, long enough to get anything accomplished.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'm going to mention, and Al has had it shown, and it's going to be the wrong name, so please, Al, correct me, is it Gary Bagley? He has the Bagley method of making and using a bodkin to make segmented bodies. So I've adapted that by using a sewing stiletto, and you can make perfectly segmented bodies, and either you can have your half-hitch stitch running under the bottom or on top. And so what I do is I'll make a little band, half-hitch it, go to the next spot, half-hitch it, force it underneath, and then when I come back, I just re-half-hitch everything, and then I've got a unique lateral line running underneath the fly. And Al's seen it before. I've shown him some flies on it, and that really makes I've had good luck with the yellow and red as a gurgler for fishing.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I'm experimenting with something, so if someone says I'm crazy, but I'm using 2-pound mono to try to create more curved bills with foam and trapping it a little bit behind the foam and using a Duncan loop to grab it, just to create a curvature that's consistently there. I started trying that with some string silencers, they use for archery, and I found I could make curved bills and trap them. I'm like, okay, this could be interesting.
I'd love to see that. I can't quite comprehend all that, but
Yeah.
it sounds good.
Dick is asking, may we get a pattern sheet for the gurgler?
Oh, yes.
I knew there was something we were forgetting there.
Yeah, I jumped ahead. Here we go. On the gurgler?
Yeah.
There you go.
Alan, I will say that here in Nebraska, the gurgler is one of the most popular flies we use for bluegill and bass and panfish and just about everything else. It's the most productive fly we've got in our box.
You want to put that back up there?
Okay. Yep. No, it's so much fun to see fish from stump knockers to, in the freshwater to snook, tarpon. They all go crazy. They love to show off. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
And ditto, John. Yeah, I enjoy tying gurglers because foam is relatively cheap compared to feathers and other stuff.
Yeah. No, they work well. They really do. So I really appreciate everyone hanging in there. If Rick, it's all yours unless someone's got any questions. That's pretty much my presentation. Enjoyed sharing this with you all.
Quick question about the leaders. When you fish your patterns, how long of a leader are you using?
I will not go under 9.5 foot on anything. I mean, it's hard to answer briefly, but generally I like to fish an 11-foot leader. And it just depends on the wind, where I'm fishing, if I can shorten that up or not. But kayaking, you're all about stealth, and you don't want to screw it up with a heavy fly line or a short leader, or you want a gentle presentation, and so that doesn't tell you too much. But yeah, generally around 11. The longer you can throw, the better. The longer leader for the most part. But sometimes you're in confined spaces and you just can't. A leader's not going to load a rod at all, too. So your bow and arrow casting and things like that sometimes. But
Kind of a dumb question, Alan, because I've never fished out of a kayak. But are you mostly standing beside it, fishing somewhere, or are you mostly sitting in it as you float along?
I'm sitting in it with my, legs kind of straddled a bit with my feet on these little pedals that guide the rudder, and all the lines right in between my feet as I strip it in. And occasionally, Al, I will get out of the kayak. If there's a good sandbar and there's activity in the area and you need to stretch a little bit, but for the most part, I'm casting and fishing, sitting down, and sometimes I don't get out for 6-7 hours, but sometimes the bottom doesn't allow you to get out really. But so I rarely stand next to the kayak. I do have a stripping basket, so I'll anchor and then I can wade an area, and bring a landing net with me. But generally I'm fishing inside the kayak and just sitting down.
Yeah, you're using one of those sit on top type kayaks.
Yeah, they're sit on top. You're not going to have any luck with a sit in.
Yeah.
Fly fishing that I'm aware of.
Hey, Alan, when you get out of your kayak, how do you anchor it?
I have an anchor trolley on each side,
Okay.
which allows me to anchor it. It'll pull from the bow or the stern once, the drift of the kayak happens. So anchor is extremely helpful when you see some rather larger fish, some bigger snook or tarpon that you may hook into, and immediately I have that anchor behind the seat and I just grab it and toss it out, and it'll grab the bottom and really help out a lot rather than otherwise you can get towed into the mangroves or wherever by some of these fish. But with a good anchor and about 18 inches of heavy galvanized chain attached to the anchor, it pretty much keeps you there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do with my pontoon, small pontoon boat. I have the anchor right behind me where I can grab it and throw it out if I need to.
No,
I used to kayak up here in Choctawhatchee Bay and have a trolling motor on the system. But I think that trolling motor is a detriment in the sense that I use the spot lock instead of an anchor, and it's always spinning that prop. Okay. And that's a difficult thing to ask for fly fishing. You kind of have to go to a spinning rod to get that distance away from the kayak to hook up with fish more often. That's kind of my lessons learned. Or otherwise, you're going to have to run that ashore and get out and do some wet fishing when you get into different locations with the kayak, because that prop motor spinning on there just sends out vibrations in the water. And I think that's enough to spook fish.
I would think that can be a huge problem when you're fighting the fish as it starts to. Redfish are notorious for diving under the boat, under the kayak. And it's tough enough to keep your rod from getting, keeping that rod tip or the last section away from the edge of the kayak, because they'll snap and they'll go around. Jacks notoriously go in circles. And if you've got a prop that's spinning or anything, once in a while they'll grab my anchor line and I can unhook that. But I can't imagine dealing with a rotating prop in your kayak. Obviously it gets you where you want to go, but to hold you in position, I don't think I would want to go that route personally. I just don't see how that would be too beneficial.
Yeah, you got a question, is your kayak motorized, right? Based on the discussion, I don't think so.
No, I do have a Jackson that I have a torpedo on, and that's an incredible electric motor. And I got to disconnect my rudder, but you use your feet to control the torpedo, and it's infinitely accurate as far as guiding you left or right. Have it directly in the stern in the back. That's an amazing I don't know who, if anyone else has a Torpedo, but I could run 40, 50 miles at a gentle, 1.5, 2 miles an hour.
Wow.
The range is just incredible, and it can get giddy up, it can move you about 5 knots if it needs to. And you carry another additional lithium ion battery for backup or for, an extended day. But, that's if you just don't feel like paddling and getting you there. But then once you're in the area, I find having that rudder to just tweak your, some areas when you're skinny, you can't use that Torpedo. You just got to pull it out of the water and it gets in the way. But yeah, they're nice. But the other kayak that I mostly use, it's strictly just a paddle and very simple haul, nothing to get in the way of the fly line, which I actually enjoy.
All right.
Yes, I'm old school because all I have is one kayak and a paddle.
That's perfect, John. Yeah.
All right, guys and gals, we are a little over what we normally go, and that's fine with me because these are great questions, and I'm learning a lot. I know that. So a mountain boy is always wondered. So if anybody's got anything that they really need to know from Alan, speak up now, or we'll shut her down here in 2 seconds or so.
Thanks. Great presentation.
Alan. Great
Thanks
presentation.
again, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan, very much.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
For everybody, before I wrap up, our next session is the 23rd of April. It's our second to the last. Britt Davenport, who's an ambassador for Norvice, will be on, and she's gotten pretty good at doing lots of tricks with CDC. I'll get it out. And she is going to share that information with us. So I invite you all now to join us. We'll be sending out reminders and the links and all that as we get closer. And as always, really appreciate all of you and all of your time for coming on and sharing with us and our teachers, sharing all their information with the rest of us, all the rest of us. So any questions before we shut it down? If not, have a good evening, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.